know, right? All right, so for those who don't know me, I'm at the head of UX at Epic Games, and it's my pleasure to moderate this panel today. It's my first time moderating a panel, so hopefully I'm not going to it up. We'll see. Panel about toxicity. That started very well. And so on that panel, I have Ruth Toner that you just saw talking. So Ruth, like you know, is data scientist on the community success team at Twitch Interactive in San Francisco. Kam Fung, who's an experience designer at Riot, who you saw talked this morning as well. And Ben Lewis-Evans, who's a UX researcher at Epic and the UX team as well. So welcome, everybody. Thank you for being here. And we're going to have a few questions, just exploring a few things. And what we're going to do is towards the end, we're going to open up the mic so you can ask questions to our panelists. I know that panels are sometimes a bit hard. It's because we're talking within that circle. So we're going to try to make sure that you feel included in that panel and we make that dynamic. So we'll see how that goes. So let's start. I'm going to start with a very simple question. What is toxicity? Ben, what do you think?
For me personally, even though I use the term in my talk, I think the word toxicity it can be somewhat negative. And while it's the accepted kind of industry term, I think it's one that we should probably move away from because it has so many negative connotations and we should be talking about encouraging positive behavior as well.
Yeah. Kam, is that what you think as well?
Yeah. We feel the same way, and at Riot we kind of take some of the responsibility for using that term. But actually, as we've learned more about the space, using the word toxicity kind of biases people towards villainizing people who exhibit this behavior. But it's not like as we're talking about in our talks, it's not people. It's just a bad day, and we all have these moments. So I prefer to think of it more as hey, we want to talk about the behaviors and how we can change that and do it in a way that's positive to players.
I think we've seen this on.
It should be on. Let's see.
It's not on. There we go. I think we've seen similar things at Twitch. Actually, there was this Stanford study recently which made this exact point, saying that basically anybody can become a troll. And I think that the actual number of people that are sort of dyed in the wool, actual really bad actor trolls is very, very small on all of our platforms. Where the vast majority of things are people that, again, are having a bad day, they've been primed for this kind of behavior, or there's some problem in the system which is encouraging this friction. Talking to my head of moderation at Twitch, his theory really is that a huge part of what you would call trolling on Twitch is caused by different communities sort of coming into contact with each other in ways that are uncomfortable, people not understanding the expectations of others. It's those kind of things. It's more misunderstandings and bad days rather than sort of villainous, toxic people. Okay.
So if we're saying that toxicity is not necessarily a good term to be using, I know that Ben, you love that term, but what do you think about anti-social behavior, and then how would you define it?
Yeah, so that's the term I tend to use. I'm not sure it's the best, but it kind of works, antisocial and pro-social behavior. And in terms of how defining it, I think it's best defined in terms of harm and harm within the community. So it can be abusive behavior, but it can also be cheating or other types of in-game behavior that impact the experience negatively. Mm-hmm. And it is somewhat also defined by the community. Depending on what community you're in, some things might be acceptable and some things might not. Okay.
So I just wanted to ask the audience here, how many of you, if you talk about toxicity in your company, do you use the term toxicity? So if so, can you raise your hand if you're using that term? Not that many people. How about antisocial behavior? Okay. Do you use another term? Griefing. What's that? Griefing. Yeah. Okay. Trolling. All right. Okay, fair enough. So griefing, yeah, we like Ruth, you were talking about that. It's not just creating griefing or irritation for other users. It's can be worse than that.
Yeah, I think that's where we kind of draw the line between what we were calling toxic, but now we're calling antisocial or abuse or griefing. At least for Twitch, I think the line really is is it just irritation, like things like spam, or is it feeling actively unsafe and unwelcome on the platform. Again, Twitch is more of a kind of a traditional social media place, so it really is for us about trolling and other kinds of, potentially illegal behavior even, where it's the behaviors that when you're actually on the platform, you think like, not only is this irritating, but I feel unwelcome and I'm harming my safety by being in this environment. And that really is kind of a lose state for us.
Kam, do you want to follow up on this?
So for us, it's a little bit different because we're mostly talking about in the game space or around the game. So I think of it more like this kind of behavior like stems from people who are not on the same page. Like we all go into a game and we're playing and we have this plan of action that we think is going to happen. And then like we have all these people, they're probably strangers for us, like these 4 other people on a team in League of Legends. And they all have their own plan and they want to do their own thing, but we might not all be on the same page. So a lot of the conflict that we see comes from like, I thought this was going to happen, and you did something completely different, and now I think you are a terrible person, or you're trying to lose the game for me. But actually, we just had different ideas of what we wanted to do.
So, there's that. We didn't talk a lot about right now about hate speech or violence. Do you think there's a different level, or do you think it should be all treated the same?
Oh no, yeah, there are definitely different levels, and there's a really firm line that we believe, and actually it's informed by what our players tell us, that they're like, hey, this is not acceptable, and there's some things that we have absolutely no tolerance for, and then but most of what we deal with is like, hey, like this kind of, the guy that we threw in the games, like it's that kind of negativity or like reaction to something going wrong into a game. Those are the hardest problems to solve. It's much more straightforward to detect somebody who's using hate speech or something like that, or like they're unrelentingly negative.
So you rely a lot on your community to tell you, where's the line. But how do you feel about? I know, like Ruth, you mentioned, having, a code of conduct at the beginning, like really made a difference. How do you feel? Do you feel that companies should be more putting a code of conduct out there and be more of like especially for hate speech and racism and sexism, like have clear rules that can be broken?
Yeah, I think with the example of like the rules that we had up there for individual channels, I think for us at least, there's nothing to be lost by being clear and transparent about, what is the minimum base standard of conduct on your site. And if you have it, then you shouldn't be hiding it. It's like, say, well, like you can't use hate speech, but like we're going to kind of push it under the rug or whatever. Like I think being clear about, this is what's good, this is what's not good. It not only helps prevent those behaviors, but it makes it'll feel a lot more kind of, fair and transparent when those things are actually enforced. Mm-hmm. So yeah, people don't like injustice, like in terms of like, rules getting, confusingly or inconsistently applied. So if you're upfront, I think it actually reduces some of the anger.
And I saw Ralph Koster was tweeting about your talk, Ruth, and saying, well, like Twitch is doing so much more than Twitter or Facebook. So I mean, it's not just having a code of conduct, but really enforcing it and make sure that it is respected, and so it's the platform is a better place for everybody. So it leads to my second question: like, what do you think the impact of antisocial behavior is on user experience on one end, and also on sales and business and a more larger scale? Ruth.
So I think these guys have more to say about sort of overall community health. We're still trying to quantify that stuff. I think one thing with like the moderation workload that I talked about, there've been a lot of this is different, but there've been a lot of articles recently in kind of the online sort of women's sphere about emotional labor and like all the things you have to do. Both like making sure that kids are taken to like school and like doing groceries and kind of other sort of thankless tasks just to keep life running. And which can kind of, it just takes a lot of mental energy and emotional energy. And I think actually in some ways that's the equivalent of what antisocial behavior creates for us on Twitch, is that someone has to actually watch the shop and take care of the community. And if you're constantly having to deal with people that are ban evading, that are like either your broadcaster or moderator, just dealing with that constant background noise of people trying to break the rules either because of simple misunderstanding or because of active maliciousness, having to like say why you were banned or not why you were banned, frankly. It's just a lot of, it's a lot of work, and also just puts an emotional strain and just an energy strain on you. So I think that really is the kind of thing which can just wear a community down. And for a lot of our broadcasters who get that kind of antisocial behavior targeted at them, they just get tired after a certain point and might not go on to become our big broadcasters.
So it's impacting the broadcasters. It's also impacting you because it's extra workload for you guys to manage all that.
Yeah, our admins do so much work. Oh my God, yeah.
And so on the side of games, what would you say is the impact on retention, Kam?
Okay, yeah. So obviously, I talked a little bit about this in my talk. That kind of negative behavior drives people away from the game. And for us, like we have an online service, and part of what we really want is players to engage with our game over the long term. And like it's not the kind of game that you can learn in 10 hours or finish in 10 hours. There's like hundreds and hundreds of hours of mastery in there. And so we want people to have the opportunity to really experience that. But if you see too much of this, it's going to drive you away from the game. So for us, it's super important that that we have a handle on it. And I would say for any of you who are working in like an online competitive game that you want to have like long-term engagement with, this should be part of the risks that you're evaluating, and it's an opportunity for you to differentiate yourself from your competitors who don't do that.
Ben, what would we say is the impact?
I mean, certainly at Epic, looking at Paragon, we found that experiencing AFKs or being someone who goes AFK yourself has negative retention impacts. Those are kind of different issues, but it's worth looking at both sides on that. We're looking at more analytics to try and get more data. We don't have it quite yet, but certainly we see in our exit surveys that we send out to people who've stopped playing the game that antisocial behavior or negative behavior is a major cited reason to leave. In addition to what Riot says is that Valve has also said that it's one of the strongest predictor. In fact, they've said it's the strongest predictor of someone leaving Dota 2 early is to experience it. And I think one thing that is often not talked about is having a community or even an idea that your game has lots of negative experiences in it can mean somebody never starts to play. Mm-hmm. So they never even show up in retention data.
Like
they
they
never
heard
show
that
up as a
it's so bad that they don't even want to try your game.
Or they have one bad experience in one game and then they carry that across everybody's game, so it has an impact across the entire industry.
But you were saying they, sorry, Kim, do you want to?
I was just gonna so there's like that like overarching like kind of like motivation to play the game, but as well like as practitioners we're like, when you think about your design and you're making things and you're testing them and you're looking for what makes your design successful or not, a lot of the times it's like friction or seeing frustration in your players. Like all those things, those are affected by the behavior that your players see in game, and it affects how much fun they have, and it affects how successful the products that you work on are, in the same way that a bad design does.
So you were saying like antisocial behavior is kind of broad. What would you say is one of the biggest factor that leads to churn? So you were mentioning AFK, which is away from keyboard, just for those who don't know that abbreviation. What other part of antisocial behavior, in your opinion, would be that the biggest predictor to churn? Trick question.
Yeah, I mean, there's so many.
Is it
parts.
more like verbal harassment or?
I think it's all of it. Yeah, sometimes it's verbal harassment. Sometimes, like in our case, it's gameplay harassment or like negative gameplay where you're not trying to win. Those are probably like the two ways that we classify those kinds of behaviors, and then obviously there's like different levels of severity of it.
Yeah. What about you?
I was going to say, I think, again, different kind of product, but I think that when you said friction earlier and what you were just saying, and I think we've seen this, where we're still trying to kind of establish this connection. It's not a single really bad experience which usually causes someone to leave a site. It's more persistent, just like, it's the straw that breaks the camel's back eventually, where it's just like, after a while, it's like, why am I on this platform? Like, it's just causing me this continuous, like, low-level background noise.
I think for new users, you come in and you're learning the game and you probably experience more negative behavior if you're losing. So you're already having a negative experience, you're losing, you're not doing very well, and then on top of that is people not supporting you and people like
Calling you
identifying all those
losers.
things. Like, you know you're bad and you're being told that you're bad.
So, okay, so it does have an impact on sales. I mean, it's economically, we need to fix that problem. What do you think? We still have so much antisocial behavior issues today, like not just in games, but overall. And what is holding studios back, like game studios, from solving this problem, or platforms like Twitch?
Yeah, I think a big part of it, and I think all of us would agree that it's frankly a really hard problem, is a big part of it. Reading both about your platforms and looking at what Twitch has to deal with, it manifests itself in very specific ways on, say, Twitch or Riot or on Epic's games. But it both in terms of where it's coming from and also where it manifests can often be related to the rest of society and the rest of the internet too. Like, again, I was mentioning earlier that our main moderator has this theory that it's oftentimes different communities coming into contact with each other, which are the source of a lot of our worst kind of social interactions on Twitch, where one person's expecting one thing and the other person's expecting another thing, and the two of them don't see eye to eye. And particularly with text chat, it's so easy to dehumanize another person, and particularly if you have no kind of established community. I mean, Twitch is kind of lucky because we have this kind of broadcast channel structure where people know each other and they're regulars, and they'll actually say hi when someone shows up. But particularly if it's just strangers talking to each other over just regular text chat, it's very easy to not think about where this person's coming from.
Yeah. Kam, do you want to follow up on that far? Or
Yeah.
your perspective from games?
Yeah, I mean, I think it goes back to the, hey, we all have different plans, we're not on the same page type of thing, and that makes it a very difficult problem to solve, because it is your perception of what's going on and not necessarily what that other person is putting out there. And so, the more obvious things are easier to catch, but we don't have best practices that are really effective for just the more common bad days that we have yet, and so that makes it tough as an industry to really move forward. So hopefully some of us will crack the nut and we'll all learn something from each other, and we can find a great set of practices that we can use in common.
Yeah, so sorry, I'm just following up on that. So you think it's just hard to have the community build some trust within each other because we just put strangers together on a platform? Do you think that's the biggest problem?
I think that is one of the problems that, in order to make our games work, we're asking strangers to get together and cooperate. And there's also opportunities, obviously, what Ben was talking about. When you engineer the system, you can make cooperation more easy, and you can incentivize people to work together or build the game such that it encourages that, and you kind of address some of the negative feedback loops that you might have, and if you're aware of them, you can start to minimize the impact of that in your games.
But it's more complicated to do that when you have a competitive game such as League or Paragon. How do you tackle that even, because they're here to compete against each other?
Yeah, well, I think it is kind of. One thing I would say to players is hey, being able to cooperate with others is a competitive advantage that you have as a player. And so if we can show you the value of that, you have a reason to get better at it. And we want to empower players ultimately to be leaders or good teammates to these people that they may know nothing about, because that's going to help you win. So I think that's the kind of thing that we want to get to in a competitive game.
Yeah, we have a similar thing where the channels on Twitch that actually build healthy communities and have healthy chat are the ones that actually tend to succeed. So building this kind of healthy environments or cooperation, I think if you teach people hey, this will be good for you in the long run, I think that's really important.
Yeah, I mean, I agree with all of this, and I also feel that it's a bigger issue than games, and a bigger issue than any one website. Is the whole culture of the internet has been this is the bastion where there's no consequence for anything. There's never any way to trace you back. And while it has lots of positives in it, there's research that shows that anonymous contact online or this low consequence contact online means that people can form really strong bonds with each other, right? Because they aren't distracted by things like what nationality the person is or what they look like. But on the same side, it's led to this culture that's across games, across the internet, that's like trolling is just something that happens. There's a mute button, use it, and it's like an acceptance of like, this is just the internet, and why would you change it? Because that's what it is, kind of thing. And I think that can be something that stops studios or stops other platforms taking action.
Yeah, well, it's a way also to like not taking any responsibility. Well, it's just people are bad people, so we can't do anything about it. When actually it's not the case. We can actually design to prevent that to happen. Okay. So I guess I'm just gonna go to the last question, because actually this is like the meat of the panel today. Is what do you think, like very concretely? Like you gave a lot of insight on what you're doing. So I just want to wrap up once again with all your insights. What do you think can be done to tackle the issue on the studio side on one end and also on the gamer side? Ben?
So as my talk showed, I take a very systematic approach, or a very systems-based approach, where I feel that a lot of the drive to make changes can be handled on the side of designers and of the side of game developers working together, sharing data, and thinking about this kind of issue right from the start, very early on in development, like we do with UX. And that we can think about how not just the social features that we're designing, which are kind of the thing that first come to mind, but also how we glorify kills, or how we provide the reward structures within our games. Do they encourage negative behavior? Do they support negative behavior? It might not be intentional, but that might be the outcome. In terms of what players can do, because I do come from this human factors systems approach, I don't really feel it's fair to expect players to be doing anything themselves. They're using a system that has been given to them, and most of them are just having a bad day and then for using that system. And so for me, most of the responsibility is on the designer.
Okay.
Which one of you had the like blurred out spreadsheet with the risks? Oh, that was awesome. Yeah, I think that's actually. Well, I might let you talk more about that, but I think design like defensively, like both assume the best and worst of your players when you make a new system. Say what you will about the most recent season of Game of Thrones, but there's the whole Peter Baelish thing of think through how can this person be behaving in the worst possible way. Which, you both do that, how could this be used to possibly hurt users, but also on the other hand, how could this be used to foster connections between users? I think that's sort of a second thing, which I was mentioning earlier, which is possible in some platforms but not others, is to give your users some degree of sense of ownership over community. Again, Twitch has this because people have these individual channel communities with their own set of rules and regulars and all that. So we kind of have this built into our system, but if you could have some sense of this is my house and I'm going to keep my house clean and sort of maintain good discourse and the rules of conduct, I think that really helps. And third, just really obviously, is just talk to your users, talk to see people on social media, stuff like that. Try and talk to users who might be your more vulnerable ones, women, people of color, stuff like that. Are there sort of missing steps or other gaps in your systems that you don't know about? So just get as much information from people that are playing your games or using your product as is humanly possible.
Yeah, I would agree, and I'll just go back to some of the things that I was saying in my talk, understand human biases, understand how humans react in real world situations, and use that knowledge to identify risks in your product and identify opportunities to accentuate the positive. Can you get people to cooperate together? Can you put little activities in there so that people can cooperate and do something, build a habit, do it over and over, and you get some feedback, and you build this habit, and it protects you from those bad days that you have.
Yeah, kind of to add to that, and to add to what I was saying, is recently at Epic we launched Fortnite Battle Royale, where 100 people jump into a map and have to murder each other. And when we launched it, we only had single player mode, so you had to go in just by yourself. And one of the big no-nos in this genre is to team up in single player, is to like pervert the whole it's you against everybody else thing. We found a problem with people doing it because there was no alternative to them. Fortnite's a team game otherwise, and we sent out a survey to players who were doing it to ask them why. And they were like, well, I didn't know this was bad. Like I want to play with my friends. Why wouldn't I play with my friends? And we have launched squads since then, and the problem's gone down somewhat.
Yeah, so a lot of it is actually a lack of awareness from the community who play the game, and they don't necessarily know. Like, I'm quitting the game, and I'm AFK, and you were mentioning that. I don't even know that it's bad, and I don't necessarily receive any notification because I just turned off the console. So there's a lot of that just people don't know, and if they know, like where you were mentioning, Ruth, in your presentation, if they know, they actually can be better. But there's also like people or like the few bad behavior people that it's actually a very small percentage, and they can make it a hell for the majority. So how can we solve for that specific problem?
Oh, are you looking at me, Celia?
I'm looking at all of you.
I think, the bad apples are really quite rare. And even like along that spectrum, it's like a lot of times it's people who are just misaligned with the standards of the rest of the community, which is, some of the stuff that you're talking about. But the community is not uniform either. But as a whole, they kind of come up with, hey, here are some boundaries, and we can do some work to tell them, hey, like this is where you're crossing the line, and these are the behaviors that you're doing that are kind of making a negative experience for others. In League specifically, our Lever Buster system, a lot of people come to the game, and if you don't play a lot of team games, you're like, well, I got to go now, so I'm just gonna leave, and the rest of your team's like, no, we really needed you. So we, our system, like when you leave for the first time, you come out and we're like, hey, in our game, leaving's not cool, and like if you keep doing it, there's going to be consequences, and we ask you to actually like type "I agree" in there, and not verbally, but have a written commitment to this, and that helps a lot with setting the standards and the boundaries for the community in that specific case.
Yeah, and it's like people are just using the tools they've got, right? There's a quit button in the game, so why can't they press the quit button in the game? But then you build those extra systems on it that say that, okay, in this case, that quit button wasn't appropriate, and here's why. And this kind of thinking is somewhat apparent across the tech industry of like, we build tools and then just people use those tools, and it's not our fault how they use them. You see it in the fake news stuff with Facebook. Their defense is always just like, oh, we just provide a platform, we don't, like, that's it. And they kind of stop there. Yeah.
I think one thing I'd like to see is more kind of onboarding for both Twitch and for other platforms is, so what you showed up on Twitch, like, what are the tools? Like, how do people usually use them and in good circumstances? Our community's already been doing some of this for us, actually. We've had people write, for instance, quick guides to, Twitch chat etiquette. So, how can you just be a good citizen when someone's streaming? How do you, help both other people and the broadcaster have fun while, not inadvertently being a jerk. Yeah. I think just to get back to like the bad actor thing, I think all this is great, but after a certain point, you do need to have some kind of plan in place for the people. Again, it's going to be a small number of people, but there is some small set of people who are just going to try and really, stir up shit and break the system. And so you should, again, I hate to say like, worst case scenario planning, but like if stuff really goes like, to hell, like, what is going to be your way of dealing with this and how are you actually going to work through the situation?
Yeah, it's like, try to reform them. If they don't respond, then it's probably better to just get them out.
Exactly.
Yeah. Although even there, like for me, when I think about that, like people that we permaban, like exit permanently from the game, those are all signals to me that the systems that we built aren't effective enough yet, and they're all opportunities for us to learn because like those people, a lot of times they're still very passionate players of the game. And I would love for them to still be there and be positive contributors to the community. And we, like, in some ways, like, we've kind of failed them by not being able to give effective feedback that helps them, figure out how they can play with all these other people constructively.
So Riot is being very vocal about what you're doing to combat that, and PUBG is also very vocal about that. Do you think this is helping actually to address the community, to explain, hey, we're doing that because it's not okay to do that? There are more companies that are trying to solve that problem without being that vocal. Do you think? What do you think do you think that's an important factor?
I think it is an important factor, and it also comes with some trade-offs as well. Like part of it is, you spotlight the problem sometimes, and you build this perception that like, oh, there's like all this bad stuff happening, and you like when you have a bad game, like you remember that more, and it's more memorable. So it starts to form this opinion in your mind of the community. So yeah, like we've talked a lot about it in the past, and I think as we've learned more, we want to try to refine how we communicate about it so that we build this idea that we're all in this together, and I think we'd love to see players feel more empowered to do something about the negative behavior they see, and that we're providing them with like good tools and approaches to do that.
Yeah, I think back to the first question about, or what was the question? Oh, it was the third question about, why haven't companies done more with this? I think perception really is a missing factor we haven't discussed much, which is, both when you discuss these problems, you're spotlighting the issue, which could be bad PR, but it also sort of helps reinforce that idea that, hey, my platform has terrible people on it, and like, oh, I don't want to be involved with that. It's like, I'm not going to go like, play that game or like, be on that website. And that can kind of help reinforce the problem too. But on the other hand, if you don't say anything, you're also creating this impression that you don't care. So it's a very, very fine line in terms of like, marketing and PR, I think, to actually thread. So I think that's one major point of, difficulty.
You wanted to say something, Ben, at some point, but no?
I'm okay.
All right. I have maybe one last question before well, I'm gonna turn it on to the audience. There's so last year, our one of our keynote speakers was Dan Ariely, and is doing a lot of research on behavioral economics. And in his book, he's talking, in some of his books, he's talking about a lot of people are actually slightly dishonest. But if you, I think he did that at Harvard University, if before having some tests at a university, you had them, sign a paper that, this is the code of conduct and you agree to sign it. And this has an effect, and people are cheating less during the exam when they do that. But the effect wears off, after a few days. So do you think this is something that we could explore, like having people like, they have to read the code of conduct and just sign up their name, like I agree to do that? Or do you think it's going to be annoying and actually like punishing a lot of players who are actually following the rules? Do you think something worthwhile to explore?
I mean, I think it is worthwhile. I'd love to see it. In fact, I recently found out that Destiny actually does it with those guided game things. If you sign up to do one as a member of a clan, they basically present you with exactly that, a code of conduct, and they ask you to agree with it. Of course, there's already been another 2 examples mentioned up here.
Yeah, I think it depends. Because the effect kind of wears off over the long term, it's great for educating and building that awareness. But there's probably some trade-offs if like we're trying to keep on tapping that solution space.
I think, technically speaking, everyone, I think, for a lot of games and services has to sign that, terms of service. That said, it's like 30 pages long, and you actually might not see the important part that's relevant to your particular life. Mm-hmm. So actually, that might be one way of doing it, is like, hey, here's this massive terms of service, but like, here's the abridged version. Like, this is, again, with the thing we did with agreeing to the rules of a channel before you chat, we saw a very positive impact there. So they're doing a version of that which is much more concise and understandable for the rules of conduct of a game or platform. That might work really well.
Yeah.
And I think there is also room, like, not just, hey, like, let's outline like the boundaries, but like, how do you identify some exemplars in your community and use them as positive examples, or identify the behaviors that like you as a player are exhibiting, and give you some feedback like, hey, you did this really well, you should keep doing it. This has a really positive effect. Not just like identifying negative things that people shouldn't do.
Okay, so before we open it up for questions in the audience, can each of you give me like maybe two or three tips for people who don't necessarily like have are in a big company with a lot of insights from UX people, or don't necessarily have the machine learning capacity to moderate that with the help of an AI, what would be like very concrete 1-2 tips that each of you would give to these people to help combating antisocial behavior in games? Just each of you, if you can just go.
I mean, my biggest tip is just try to think about what the impact of the design decisions you're making is. Like a general chat that everybody's in automatically can be really great. It's great for social and stuff like that. But do you get just as good an impact by making it an opt-in global chat that's still there and clearly advertised? Like, think about these things.
Right. So have chat opt-in instead of opt-out.
Yeah, I agree with that. Just sort of think through how could this be gamed. I mean, a very famous personality in games said recently, like, you know, people who play games are gamers. They're going to game your systems, and oftentimes, like, the worst kind of harassment can be people playing games, like metagames, essentially trying to, you know, to basically subvert your systems to do something bad. So get both. Think like a troll, I guess would be one way of saying it. Or also, again, listen to your users. You know, go if you are, like, you know, already running your game, you know, go on social media, and if people are having problems, you know, what are the vectors by which things are going wrong? So again, think defensively, like Ben was saying.
Yeah, I mean, we've all been saying the same thing, like understand bias and apply them, and understand like how your systems are affected by that. Like when we were testing, we straight up asked people like, hey, how would you game this system? And that's how we identified some of those risks. Like, hey, will players just honor only each other and their friends? Like, oh yeah, this is how we try and get the most honor. Doesn't need to take a lot of resources. It's just a mindset. You know, educate yourself a little bit, and then just remember, like, think about applying that to the decisions that you make. The changes that we're talking about, they're not like big engineering decisions that take a lot of, you know, engineering time or scope. They're like just little decisions, and you're like, if I just flip this one switch, maybe we have a big effect.
We've seen the same, yeah.
All right, time for questions. Don't be shy. And take your time. Don't fall on those stairs. They're pretty scary. When you ask your question, can you just tell us where you work and, you know, how big is your team, and if you can talk about the game, you know, if it's unannounced, of course, don't mention it, but if you can just tell us what type of project you're working on.
May I begin? So I'm Dorian. I was up there talking about Warframe, and one question that I had in regards to toxicity is I feel like a lot of the conversation is particularly about punishing the perpetrators in terms of what we can do to reduce that harassment online. What do you believe in? Is there any viable solution essentially to what can we do for the victims in that case? To give it an analogy, say you go to a restaurant and they screw up your order. Typically they say, we're sorry you had a bad experience with your product, here's a free coffee on us. Do you think there's any value in kind of taking that approach instead? Or in parallel with that?
Great question.
I would say heck yes. Yeah, generally speaking, I think that's one thing that we like to do a lot more of is to really to transparency both for, like, you know, when you're punished, be transparent, but also I think with, like, hey, your report's been dealt with, that kind of thing, like that very basic, like, level of it's been received and action has been taken. One thing which we've sort of thought about a little bit, just in terms of, you know, if someone does need to talk to someone, you know, is there some kind of service they should be connected to? We haven't really done anything with this, but yeah, both transparency for this has been dealt with, but also sort of trying to say, like, you know, yeah, you're a valued part of this community, and do you need, you know, additional support from us?
Yeah, I think one thing along those lines is often one thing that can keep negative behavior online alive is the fact that the people doing the negative behavior are having the fun of playing the game or watching the Twitch stream or whatever it might be, plus the fun of abusing somebody on top. So they're actually getting double the fun or more. Whereas the person being abused is having their experience reduced. So certainly if you can find ways to boost that experience back up. And I do think that these feedback systems you can send to, hey, we're listening to you, and the positive encouragement systems of we're rewarding positive play, and kind of those are a good approach.
Do you want to add something to it, Kam?
Yeah, I think you guys said everything that I was thinking. You know what? I would also say, like not just like how do we, make people who are on the receiving end of this like feel better after the incident, but like, are we giving them the appropriate tools to manage this like in the moment, and like some of that is muting, although even there it's like in some ways the damage is done, like somebody has already been so terrible to you, but can we intervene in real time as Twitch does, and you catch these chat incidences before they happen, and then you shield players from it, or can we equip players with the tools to respond appropriately and effectively to somebody who does say something negative? Because a lot of the times, you have retaliation as well, and then just your misunderstandings spiral out of control, and like everybody ends up looking bad and in a bad place, or maybe you have somebody who is just listening and you've ruined their game as well. So like how do you de-escalate these things, and how do we show players a way that they're empowered to take ownership of that as well?
Thank you.
Hey guys, I'm with Congregate, and we've got about 100-person team. And you guys have been talking about how, most bad behavior is a bad day. And that's absolutely true. But certainly, in 10 years of Congregate, we've had, it's just a handful of people, but a handful of people go crazy and dedicate their lives to ruining the platform and treating it like, a 40-hour week to every crazy kind of spam and harassment possible. Have you, other than trying to prevent them from happening, do you have any tools or advice on dealing with the sort of ultra craze? Because most of the things we're talking about have, for us at least, they stop working at a certain point.
I guess, two things on that. I think one thing which we've done, which I think is really important, is when you do have a moderation team, which is taking care of your entire platform or site, sort of the end-all and be-all team, they need to be trained well, essentially. They can't just be casual people doing this in their spare time. They need to actually have like some degree of onboarding and like a series of systems for like, okay, let's say things get really bad, like, how do we deal with this person? How do we contact law enforcement? That kind of stuff. So it really is, it's a full-time job to try and just like, know all these systems and the procedures to take when stuff gets, again, really crazy. I had a second point. And so when things get really bad, so one very persistent problem for us has been ban evasion, with someone making a new account and coming back to again do that 40-hour week job. And that almost actually verges on an IT problem at that point. It's more kind of, classic fraud type detection problems, where you do need to think a little bit about, like, let's say this was someone like trying to impersonate someone else to cause fraud, like, what kind of tech tools might you use in that case? And there are consulting companies that can help work on solutions like that. But it's very much an IT problem at that point.
Yeah, I agree. Like, you've got to... And one thing I'd say as a caution is dealing with these people can become a huge drain on resources, and you need to consider how much effort you're putting into a small minority of people who are bad, and worry about the kind of, if that's taking away from usual
their
stuff.
forums become unusable because they're constantly spamming it. It is, yes.
So I would say, like, for that specific case, like, the machine learning systems that we use and Twitch does, like, those are really effective at that kind of behavior, and they're really automated and fast. So like that can help tamp down that sort of extreme behavior, because that at least is a little easier to detect. It's like people who are dedicated to trying to game the system and get around those systems that are tricky and like can be expensive to sort of mitigate.
Thanks. I can maybe take one or two more questions before we break.
Hi. My name is Marie. I work as a UI lead at Ubisoft Montreal. And I have a question about visual design, actually. I'm a bit surprised that, I'm surprised that so far in the day, no one mentioned Splatoon. And Splatoon is a competitive online game, and it's an FPS. And it has a really family-friendly community. And I was wondering if there are any insights on the impact of visual design and marketing campaigns on priming people's behaviors.
Is there a chat in Splatoon?
Yeah, there's no communication in
No
Splatoon.
That helps.
That's a secret, I guess.
I mean, I think recently they added one, but you have to download a separate app to even get it.
There's a community of people who play.
There are.
Yeah.
But within the game, it's very hard to be negative. The game basically has
Yeah, it prevents you
no
from being
pathways for doing it.
Yeah, that goes along with what you're saying. You know, if you design to have a great experience with others, then you can't really harass other people. But there's a lot of harassment that actually goes through text and voice chat. And so one of the options is just like remove it. And if you don't have any voice chat or any text, then you're free of harassment. And if people want to communicate with each other, they can download, an application out of the game to, discuss with their friends. But that's a option.
Just anecdotally, I have seen that just people I know that play Splatoon tend to be, not your traditional picture of a gamer. So I think there is at least some aspect to that this is the product that's being sold to me as like, it's fun, it's kids and squids and all that. And I think Twitch has sort of tried to have that kind of like sort of our kind of brand as sort of fun, anarchic, like I think sort of like this is like the culture, like we have like these fun in-jokes, like which tend to be very family friendly. We've sometimes had cases where like memes have gone sour, and that's become a brand problem for us. I think at least in terms of like setting that initial like welcoming position of like, hey, this kind of thing is what we're selling to you as our culture. I think getting people in the door, that's a good thing.
Yeah, but I do think like visual design may have some impact, but I mean...
It's part of it.
But like places like Disney Games, Disney Forums, or when Club Penguin was around or whatever, they were still full of abuse, and they had very cute visual designs and stuff like that.
You have to be dedicated to ruin the platform, Club Penguin.
But yeah, I think you made a great point. Like I know when we were working on Honor, like the visual design was critical to the feedback that we're giving players. Like we didn't want to give players a lot of tangible rewards because that might just make you feel like you're doing it for the rewards that you're getting. And so we really tried to amp up the emotions and the feelings that you get from recognition that other players are giving you. And yeah, I think you could apply that holistically across a game, and how you frame it to your community also matters. Although in the case of something like Splatoon, I don't think that's like really an industry-wide solution because it's like it more channels the type of audience that engages with your game, whereas like that's probably not as much like most of the people that we think of as gamers like maybe like didn't really engage with Splatoon, but the people who did really like those values resonated with them. But we still need solutions that work across like our broad range of different players.
All right.
Thank you.
I think we're running out of time. Did you have like one quick question? Just one quick question.
Yep, I got a quick one, and it actually follows up from the last question. So we talked a lot about like what each platform individually is doing for the industry, for the community to reduce toxicity and all that. But the last question brought up a really good point, and Ben, you kind of touched on it a little bit, but for Twitch specifically, your community is comprised of the communities of Riot and Epic and everyone in this room combined. And so my question is, in an ideal world, right, we talked about the future, what is an ideal world in the future for partnerships between the platforms to solve this problem? And then what are the steps that you guys think we need to take to get there?
Interesting. Yeah, I think in terms of like developers working with Twitch, for instance, I think kind of the Twitch ideal is that, again, for any broadcaster, whether you're Riot Games or just like some random person who decides to start streaming on a Saturday, I think in our case it's that we have the tools and support so that you can create basically your own house and you maintain those house rules, and you have basically there's some type of conversation you want to have. Like it's not all just people saying like I love you, I love you, I love you, but there is going to be like some like discussion there, and you can decide again what's acceptable in terms of like just basic standards of decency. I think in terms of partnerships, already I think we have some level of customization. Like For instance, we oftentimes refer to our most strict auto-mod rating as the Nintendo rating, because they always asked us, they always wanted very, very, very strict moderation in terms of what was said in chats. And so this one pretty much, I think, it gets the closest to that kind of like, squeaky clean, family-friendly kind of environment. We'd like to be able to scale this better, I think. Again, always involving humans in the process. We will, if a game development company comes to us and says, like, we'd like to have this event, we're worried people might get a little bit out of hand, we will provide supports and advice. Support in terms of actually having those Twitch-wide moderators come and do moderation for your chat. Or consulting, basically, like, here are the tools we have, like, here are even some third-party things you might consider. So I think really streamlining a lot of that and just making it scale so that you don't have to be Riot Games to get that kind of, white glove service, but even just some random, young woman wanting to stream on a weekend can, like, just can feel safe and secure, setting up a community of their own.
All right, anything to add?
I mean, in terms of cooperation between companies, it's early days yet, but we're all members of a group that's forming with basically representatives from nearly every major publisher and major studio that is working to share data around this and share what works and doesn't work.
We're talking about that? Cool.
We're not officially announcing it, but it exists.
Yeah, there's been a lot more data sharing recently too, I think. Not keeping things siloed, but like, just sharing best practices, like high-level data, like, some things are a competitive secret, but like just best practices, like, hey, we all want to make gaming better for everyone, so.
Yeah, I mean, personally, I'd like nothing better than for this to become, like table stakes for a game. It's standard practice that we all use these, and we don't have to compete on it anymore. It's just like, let's go compete on making the most fun game that people want to play for a long time, or whatever your goal is.
All right, we'll wrap this up. Thank you so much, Ben.